I was listening to you speak at the Wilson Center this week. You described a moment of growing antagonism, rivalries that are reappearing, and conflicts that are springing everywhere, you said. Will this G20 bring a platform to resolve these growing issues?
Well, I would say the main task that Brazil has for G20, first is to keep dialogue afloat. Mm-hmm. We need to have a G20 which is functioning well, keeping countries discussing the important issues, and as much as possible to concentrate on those issues that Brazil considers to be the most important points and objectives of the international agenda, mm-hmm. like overcoming poverty, mm-hmm. fighting hunger, reducing inequality. So Brazil would like to see a G20 which is focused not on conflicts, but focused on the main, I would say, common objectives that we have, including sustainable development and the fight against climate change. So let's have a more positive agenda on that.
Yeah. Well, much was said at the G20 finance ministers meeting. I'm sure, as you remember, there was disagreement over how to characterize the war in Ukraine, and we were left with a communique that nobody would sign. How do you avoid a scenario like that?
Well, I think that we should see G20 in a more comprehensive way. We are going to have 120 meetings in G20, including the summit in Rio in November, 18 and 19 of November. And what we have been witnessing in all the meetings, and we have already had more than 30 meetings, is a wide convergence on the objectives that Brazil has established for G20. For example, launching a global alliance against hunger and poverty. Mm-hmm. Also, a mobilization against climate change. So I see, I would say, good prospects for advancing all those issues, because the negotiation around those issues have been advancing well.
Yeah. Well, this is a real peek behind the curtain that you're giving us. People tend to see a big family photo and they read a communique at the end of a G20. These are conversations that start months in advance with envoys like you from each country. But of course, you're hosting the G20, so you obviously have a much greater influence on the way this is going to roll out. But these are the meetings that determine the agenda that the leaders will follow. Yes. Is that right?
Yes. But let's not over-exaggerate the importance of one specific communique in a specific meeting. Because the most important communique will be the leaders' declaration at the end of the process, right? And for that purpose, the idea that we have concrete results by the summit is something that we think it's achievable, because so far Brazil has been receiving a wide support for those priorities that we established. Mm-hmm. The three of them, as I said, the question of poverty and hunger, the question of climate change, and the other question which is important, global governance, so that we can have more productive and constructive dialogue in order to achieve those objectives.
Mm-hmm. President Lula is again calling to reform the United Nations and other multinational organizations. Think the World Bank, because they are, quote, this is from your foreign minister, not equipped to deal with current challenges. As we see the paralysis in the UN Security Council, for instance, how is the G20 different in its ability to affect the global conversation?
Yes. No, these, I would say, very dire situation in which, for example, last year we had a record number of conflicts in the world, 183 among states, within states. So it is a record in 30 years. We are back to the Cold War times in terms of number of conflicts.
Yeah, how about that?
So we need a strong UN, because the UN, the United Nations, was created to preserve peace and avoid war. Mm-hmm. So the main organization to deal with that is not today managing to have its task fulfilled, because disagreements are happening. So we need to give a push to the reform. But it comes to the other question that you presented. G20 is not itself an international organization.
Right.
So it does not establish the norms, but it establishes, in a way, part of the agenda and influences a lot the agenda and the process in other organizations. So one of the objectives that Brazil has is to push for the reform of the UN with G20. That's why we are planning to do, for the first time in history, one meeting of G20 inside the headquarters of the United Nations. It will be in September 26th.
Yeah.
So that from inside we can also give a push to the reform.
Well, so you talk about reform that's necessary in these groups. Look at what's happening in the Security Council. Russia is a big part of the problem here. And there have been suggestions that Russia should be kicked out of groups like these, should be kicked out of the G20. I don't know your thought on that. Some think that it's more effective to keep them in the fold and have a dialogue. What does Russia deserve?
Brazil wants a more inclusive Security Council, not a less inclusive Security Council, in the sense that in order to have the capacity of achieving agreements through dialogue and diplomacy, you need to have more diversity, not less diversity. So Brazil, in that sense, is supportive of a reform of the Security Council from, well, I would say since the last decades, for a long time doing that. And we think that this is the part of the reform of the UN. The UN is more than the Security Council, but the Security Council is the core in terms of preserving peace and avoiding war. And we think that a more representative Security Council would be, I would say, the instrument for it to be more effective.
What would be more representative, just to be clear?
To have, representation which is no longer a mirror of the aftermath of Second World War. Okay. That's what is the Security Council nowadays. But we are no longer in 1940s. We are into 2024, and we need to have an updated Security Council in order to deal with the challenge of today.